It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and the nurse comes out and she wants to take her. She was so tiny. She was like less than 5 months old. And I didn't know if I would ever see my baby again.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing good. I'm a bit nervous, but I'm okay. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, that's good to hear. You'll do just fine, inshallah ta'ala. So throughout this series, we have been discussing the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and his legacy that he left for our ummah to follow in his footsteps. And his story cannot be complete without also including the mention and the story, the legacy of Hajar alayhi salam, and the example that she set for us as well. What is an aspect of her story, the motherhood aspect in particular, that really sticks out to you?
SubhanAllah, if we think of their story, there is a lot to think about. It cannot just be confined in one statement or one sentence. But one thing that sticks with me the most is her perseverance and her compassion and her persistence in being there for her son when she was left alone. But yet she knew she wasn't alone in the desert. And her going back and forth between the Safa and the Marwa, not giving up, trying her best because her son was crying when she ran out of food and water. And she wanted to do the best she can as a mother, because at that moment she wasn't just being the mother, she was being the mother and the father in a place where there is not another human being where she can ask for help or somebody that can even look after her baby. And we as mothers know that we can barely leave our babies for like a few seconds alone, yet she had to leave him and go look for something or look for signs of people or water or food so maybe she can help her son. And to me, that just sits deep, because we do that, if we look back at it, like we do that in our daily practice, daily life, where we just don't think about ourselves, but we think about our kids. And subhanAllah, Hajar alayha salam, when he walked away from her, when she had no idea why, and she was asking, why are you leaving us alone? And he wouldn't answer. Ibrahim alayhi salam, then she said, Allahu amaraka bihada. And then he just said, yes. She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She didn't deny him that right. She just said, إِذَا لَا يُضَيَّعَنَ اللَّهُ. So she had that certainty. She was a great wife, a great believer, with certainty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not let her be alone. And to me, that persistence guides me through a lot of things, that sometimes when things are just so hard and you want to give up, that you just remember and you say, no, I got to keep going. And for her, it happened around 7 times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then finally sends Angel Jibreel, and then the water comes out. And then we know like a whole life from there starts. So subhanAllah, her persistence sometimes just in my daily life, like with my kids, and I have 4, of which 2 are adults. Sometimes you feel like you can't do it anymore, but then you remember the struggles of other people, and then you're like, no, I got to keep going. Because those examples and those stories is what actually helps us and gives us the courage and the extra push that we need to keep going. So subhanAllah, to me, that sticks the most, when she was alone by herself.
SubhanAllah, that's really powerful, and it's really insightful and enlightening to hear that her legacy and her story is still with you even as your children are adults, and maybe even more so that the fact that she was dealing with an infant doesn't change the fact that her story is impactful for motherhood, for mothers in their stages of motherhood, regardless of where their
you get
kids are
tested
at.
with motherhood in all different stages. But when she was doing her sa'i, and when I would do like things that I want in my life, that I want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make happen in my life, when I do dua, which is the part I have to do, and I learned this through time, subhanAllah, and I've had many things answered in my life, and I tell people, subhanAllah, that's a tool that we underestimate and we don't use often, is I go into sincere dua, and I tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, you know what's in my heart. And I just do it with such certainty that I'm just very certain it's going to happen. And ana anda dhanna abdi bi, and that's what I have. I have hasdan billah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not there's nothing coincidental. So subhanAllah, we always say Allah's the best of planners, and I always kind of have to reset that button in the morning.
Let's take a moment to transport ourselves to a hypothetical scenario wherein, say, you are performing Umrah or you're performing Hajj and you're performing the integral act of Sa'i. You are walking back and forth, and all of a sudden, you find out that there's no food, there's no water. You have an infant child with you who is hungry, who is crying. There is no other resources you have to access any communication with anybody. Your phone is dead. Your rest of your family is not with you. And as you're in this moment of desperation, you see a woman walking towards you with some Zamzam. She gives it to you, to your child, and you're satiated, you're comfortable. And she informs you that she is Hajar, عليها السلام, and that it's in her footsteps and in following her legacy that you are performing this act of Sa'i. How would you respond? How would you react?
If I was in that situation, I would probably feel like I'm in her shoes when she was in a place where there was no one. But I'm surrounded with a lot of people. That's a different scenario, right? I wouldn't even know. Her legacy, just till today, her legacy is being lived, with men and women. The sa'i that she did is khalladahullah. So subhanAllah, like people, men and women do that till today. I would just tell her what an amazing, beautiful woman she was, and how we learned so much from her as Muslim women, whether it was from the motherhood, the women that when she conducted the business with trading with the people that came to Mecca, when they shared the water with her, she played so many roles. And I would just thank her for that, because she is a perfect example for every Muslim woman in this ummah.
Drawing on your experiences through the journey of motherhood, what is one experience that you've had that was a really defining moment for you, where you really understood the countless sacrifices that mothers go through?
SubhanAllah, there was a lot of them that I went through, but there was a particular one. I remember when my daughter was born and I had a normal pregnancy, everything was okay. I took her to her first doctor's appointment. At this point, she was 5 days old. And I noticed before that, actually, that she was taking deep breaths and it was hard for her to eat. And the doctor told me that she was a cardiac patient and I had to run her to a specialist ASAP. And we had to live like really very hard 5 months. And I remember there was a particular time where my husband was out of town for a business trip and I had to make a call that she's to have her first open heart surgery when she was 5 months old. And I had no other choice but to do that. So he rushed back. And I remember being in that waiting room where you wait with your baby, they get her ready. It was 6 o'clock in the morning and the nurse comes out and she wants to take her. She was so tiny. She was like less than 5 months old. And I had to hand her over. And that open heart surgery was very risky. And I didn't know if I would ever see my baby again. And in that moment, I remembered my own mother, who would always tell us her struggle and her hardship and her story of losing 2 baby girls before I was born, 2 months apart. And I couldn't hand my daughter over. I just held on to her so tight. And I said, please, let me go with her. I'll be in the room, but I just don't take her away from me. She needs to smell me. I need to be there with her. And they told me, sorry, we can't do that, Ms. Hamida. And that's not possible. And I just couldn't let go. And then my husband took her from me and he kissed her and he handed her over. And that was very, very hard to see. And I remember those 6 hours were the longest 6 hours of my life. I kept waiting for updates, and I got to a point where I said, Ya Allah, if she was meant to be a gift for 5 months, I'm okay with that. Subhanallah. And then finally the doctor comes out and then he tells us that, alhamdulillah, everything was okay and she made it and everything is good. And this particular scenario plays in my head now, every day, when I see what comes out of Gaza, Palestine daily. At least I know my daughter was going into an OR room with the professional surgeons, and I was praying to Allah that I get to see her and hold her again. And seeing those mothers daily maybe not even seeing their children. They disappear.
Yeah.
Over 13,000 children. And that makes it really hard for me, because I remember it was really hard for me to hand my daughter over to a professional nurse and doctor with the reassurance, of course, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the doctor saying she'll be okay. But that was very hard. So I can't envision or imagine what those mothers are feeling daily. It's very hard. And I'm reminded with that daily. And I'm very thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that my test, because motherhood could be easy. But then when you are tested, when there's a hardship, then it's a different taste of motherhood. Then you really have to be and wear a lot of hats and play a lot of roles. So subhanAllah, that was really hard for me.
Say that you were in this room, but not with us, but rather with Ibrahim عليه السلام and his family, Sarah, Hajar, Ismail, Ishaq عليهم السلام. What would you tell them?
Again, that's very hard to envision. Besides the honor and the, surprise, and they're all together have the perfect example of what a family should be in Islam. Or they, through their hardship and their struggles, they showed us that. Whether it was Ibrahim alayhi salam when he was the believer that we know that he was, and Khalilullah, and then Ismail alayhi salam when he grew older and he was raised by his mother alone, and then his father comes back, and then they build the Kaaba, then he's asked to sacrifice him. His love for his son, I can't even imagine. And then he was willing to sacrifice his son, and that again shows us that he was this amazing believer, that he was even willing to sacrifice his own son. And his son, the obedience that he showed to his dad, that is just, it's something we cannot see nowadays. So subhanAllah, they played such a role as a family that this should be taught not just to the Muslim Ummah, but to the world, because sometimes you just do things because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks you. And to me, I look at that and I'm like, I aspire to at least follow some of these, qualities that this amazing family had. So subhanAllah, it's like a whole package altogether, yeah. Alhamdulillah.
لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك لبيك والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك